Hello everyone. Today in this video I'm going to be covering some of the tips and tricks that we do as our group to help us do high keys that might not be well known or explain some are known but don't know how to do some of them. The first tip in Azure Vault is for Laymore, in which it is possible as a high mobility tank with a leap to completely outrange the frontal mechanic, heavily reducing the amount of tank damage. As a demon hunter, it's quite easy to do with double jump, vengeful retreat into leaping away, then easily leaping back into the boss after the frontal has gone off to pick up the slimes. It is possible to skip the first platform after dealing with Laymore by just jumping down, either by gliding or the parasol toy, since you don't need all that trash on the first platform for percent. There's plenty of trash elsewhere that you can gain throughout the dungeon. The tip for Azure Blade is the fact that you can leap away from the Arcane Cleave to negate all the damage from it. Just have to be careful about facing when eating the boss away. You can kill your melee quite easily with it if you are leaping towards the ad that spawns. It is possible to skip the first breaker after Azure Blade by pulling the breaker to the left hand side of the stairs, while everyone else in the group is hugging right hand side of the stairs. Our mage does this by pulling, then blinking away from it into the room, and then invising it off, but can be done with any class that has mobility and shadow meld. This allows you to pull all the trash in this first room all the way down to the next set of stairs. In the room just before the double breakers heading towards the third boss, it is possible to rescue a range or a healer to the lector shown in the screen to stop the frogs from jumping everywhere, and to stop the breakers from charging the DPS or the healer, allowing the DPS to do more damage without having to worry about the mechanics. Just like the first breaker, the two breakers before the third boss, Telesh Greywing, is skippable by pulling the two breakers towards the left hand side of the platform, while the group hugs right side of the platform to not get in combat so they can take the book across. Once everyone of the group is across, the easiest way to drop combat is by dying, by jumping off the edge, or just dying to the breakers. Otherwise, it's possible to shadow meld or invis the breakers off and quickly taking the book across before getting back into combat with the breakers. The knocker defensive tips are mostly in the first boss area to help limit the amount of damage the group takes. The first being that the Beastmaster will put a hunter's mark onto a random player. This mark will allow the longbows to consistently shoot that target. It is possible to force this onto the tank so they all get the shoots from the longbows, greatly reducing the group's damage intake. To bait the hunter's mark onto the tank, everyone else needs to be about 30 yards away, staying on their mounts while the tank pulls the mobs. Only until the hunter's mark is going out can the group come in and start focusing damage. This works on all Beastmaster packs. If you don't have an Evoker Rescue in the group, it is possible to CC the War Spear charges to negate the bleed effect from them. Some of the examples are Ring of Frost, Hunter's Trap, hard CCing the cast, such as Hodge, Typhoon, Ursals. It's also possible to blink or disengage the charges if the cast goes off to avoid the bleeds as well. If you do have an Evoker Rescue, it is possible to rescue one of your range players up to the top of the spears, or everyone stacks into the group to skew the Z-axis of the War Spears, so they cannot charge anyone. I have highlighted where our priest has been rescued on top of the spears for reference for the War Spears packs. During Season 1, most groups were skipping the last pack, but with the third boss area becoming lethal after the dungeon changes that came in, we found it more efficient as a team to play the last pack with the two Thunderfisters that just need to be interrupted. This pool is quite a lot of percent, and it saves a meld or invis that can be used for the last boss spear mechanic. And you can negate the charging mechanic from one of the ads just by facing him into the wall because he charges the closest player. For Notheris, there are a couple of things that are a bit complex but can make the dungeon a bit easier. First off is skipping as many hunters as possible, since they are lethal for the healer and the DPS in the group. The first hunter skip can be done by sleepwalking if the bird is in a bad patrol, or you can entangling root it or natty skip it by hugging the left hand side when the bird lands next to the hunters. This part is the most complex part of the dungeon to get done well. When doing the chains, it is possible that everyone can use the single chain at once. If everyone clicks on the chain at the same time and pops the chain onto the mobs, the effect does stack. So instead of one person doing 50% of the damage buff, it's possible to have the mobs take 250% increased damage. It is a small window to be able to do this, so we allow our Augur Vogo to stun them and do a timer for us to click on the chain and pop it. The next hunter skip is skipping the two hunters right before the second boss, Kargath. By hugging the right side of the room and triggering the walk to the stairs, The evoker can then sleepwalk them up, and they sit up top of the stairs. It is important to note that sometimes they do walk down after the sleepwalk runs out, but we are very unsure as to why they do this. The third hunter after Kargath is also skippable by sleepwalking it towards the left-hand side of the room and by running to the right-hand side of the room. Like the first chain pop, it is possible to pop all 5 chains onto the next pool after Kargath, which helps speed up the run dramatically. With percent not being much of a problem in Netharis, it is possible to skip a decent amount of the trash. We skip the first 2 set of lava flares to save our CDs for the next pool. We skip by double fear sigilling and pulling away the lava bearer into the corner so that the group doesn't get into combat. Once everyone is through, just melting the combat off and continue with the dungeon. The trash right before the third boss, Forgemaster Gorak, it is possible to line of sight the lava flares at the wall, making it easy to pull the trash right next to the boss with the trash upstairs of the room. If you are struggling for time in this dungeon, combining these 2 pulls saves about 2 minutes, which is a decent amount of time. The last tip for Neltharis is snapping the 2 lava mancers that are in the way going to the last boss. To do this, any tank just needs to grab aggro onto the lava mancers by jumping down, while being careful of the bird if you have skipped it, and going onto the platform. These will snap to you. Things to note is that sometimes they will just reset, if not quick enough, to the platform. A quick Alderman tip is that it's possible to skip the first Ebenstone Golem after the 4th boss with a speed increase by hugging the right side of the wall. If the trash gets pulled, depending on the route you and your group have selected, it still might be faster to die and get rezzed rather than fight the pack. Academy, there is a spot for range and healers to sit on a ledge shown in this video to stop the Ravagers and the Foragers, aka the Mana Worms, to stop leaping onto the group or lowering the amount of damage the group takes. For Vexamus, there is a DH specific trick that they can do, which involves them double jumping ventral retreating to avoid the frontal blast that Vexamus does. This completely negates all the damage. The only thing to note about ventral retreating is the fact that it won't be up for every single blast, so you'll need to use your DRs to survive the frontal attack. At the end of the dungeon, a priest can mind control the Ethereal Restorer. This mind control from the priest gives access to Celestial Shield that can be put onto other group members for survivability and a slight damage increase while the shield is active. You can take this into the last boss. For Brackenhide, there is a rock that any range or healer can stand on after the first boss to completely negate the bleed from the lashes and the frontal from the tree, due to the rock being on a higher Z-axis. The thing to note here as a tank is that they need to be close to the cliff side of the wall for this to work. If the mobs are tanked close to the cauldron side of the rock won't work. If you see on screen that our range are just sitting on this rock without having to worry about any sort of mechanics. On the way to the second boss, there is a spot that is very similar to the rock in which evokers can rescue a player on top of the spiked pole to negate the trees and lashes bleed dot again. The third spot is evoker only cheese in which they can rescue your ranged players onto a route that is just before the 2 patrolling trees. As you can see on screen, our invokers rescue our priest up onto the route and then life gripping the mage to the route as well. This allows our range to just focus on damage without having to worry about any mechanic. For the third boss, if you don't have any immunities but have an Orc Evoker, it is possible to Wormstone out of the consuming mechanic, allowing 3 people to do this. I as a tank would normally do the first consuming, our Evoker does the second, and swaps the Wormstone off me to our Paladin healer that will do the third with the Wormstone rather than immuning it. That's the end of the video. Hopefully you've learned something new during this video. Until next time, peace.